You pick up a rock. You hit it against another rock. Nothing happens. You try again, at a slightly different angle. A flake breaks off, thin, sharp, gleaming at the edge. You just made a knife. For most of human history, this was not a hobby. This was survival. Long before writing, before agriculture, before anything you would call civilization, your ancestors were engineers. Not with blueprints. Not with metal, with bone, stone, fiber, and fire, and an almost unbelievable amount of trial and error. Some of what they built sounds too strange to be real. But it is real. And some of it is still saving lives today, hidden inside tools you use without ever thinking about where they came from. So how did a species with no metal, no wheels, and no written instructions invent tools sharp enough to bring down a mammoth? Let's start at the beginning. Around 2.6 million years ago, at a site in Tanzania called Olduvai Gorge, something changed. Researchers Louis and Mary Leakey uncovered simple stone tools there in the 20th century. Tools so old they predate our own species, Homo sapiens, entirely. These were called Oldowan tools, named after the gorge itself. They were not fancy. Just a rock struck against another rock to create a sharp edge. But that sharp edge changed everything. Before this, your ancestors could not cut through tough hide. They could not crack open bone to reach the fatty marrow inside, one of the richest food sources on the savannah. A stone flake solved both problems at once. Suddenly, meat that used to be inaccessible became dinner. Think about what that actually required. There was no teacher. No manual. Someone had to notice that certain rocks broke in a specific way when struck at a specific angle. Someone had to test it, fail, adjust, and try again, probably thousands of times, across thousands of years, refined and passed down by watching, not by words. Anthropologists Kathy Schick and Nicholas Toth spent years actually relearning this lost skill by hand, a field called experimental archaeology. Their conclusion was humbling. Making a clean stone flake is harder than it looks. Even trained modern humans need real practice to do what your ancestors mastered well enough to teach their children. And stone was only the beginning. Fast forward to a site in Germany called Schöningen. In the 1990s, archaeologist Hartmut Thiem uncovered something that startled the entire field. A set of wooden spears, roughly 300,000 years old, buried in ancient lake sediment that had preserved the wood almost perfectly. These were not sharpened sticks. They were balanced, aerodynamic, weighted at the front like a modern javelin. Someone understood physics they had no words for. Now picture the moment these spears were actually used. It's dusk. The sky has gone orange over the grassland. A group crouches low near a waterhole, spears gripped tight, breathing slow. A horse, one of the animals found alongside the Schöningen spears, lowers its head to drink. There is no room for a second attempt. One thrown spear, aimed by muscle memory built over a lifetime, could mean the difference between a full winter and a hungry one. This was not brute instinct. This was applied engineering, tested against life and death. Here's where it gets stranger. Survival did not stop at hunting. It also required staying warm, staying clothed, staying stitched together, literally. In Denisova Cave in Siberia, researchers found something no one expected from that deep in the past. A needle, carved from bird bone, with a tiny eye drilled through one end, dated to roughly 50,000 years ago. A needle. The same basic tool sitting in your junk drawer right now. Why does a needle matter so much? Because a needle means tailored clothing, not just a draped animal hide. Tailored clothing means layers that trap heat instead of leaking it. And that difference, snug sleeves instead of a loose wrap, may have been one of the quiet reasons some ancient human groups survived brutal Ice Age winters that others did not. So let's reconstruct a night around 60,000 years ago, somewhere in an Ice Age landscape. The sky has gone deep indigo, stars scattered overhead. Inside a shelter, a woman sits near a small fire, pulling a bone needle threaded with sinew through a hide. She is not just making a coat. She is making the difference between her child waking up shivering or waking up warm. Multiply her by thousands of individuals, over tens of thousands of years, each one solving a tiny problem with whatever material was on hand, and you start to understand where human technology actually comes from. Not one genius. Not one invention. An enormous, patient accumulation of small fixes. Now here's the twist. the part that flips the whole story. We tend to imagine ancient humans as constantly one step from disaster, primitive, fumbling, barely scraping by. But the tools tell a different story. Anthropologist James Sussman, who has spent years studying modern hunter-gatherer communities like the Duahonsi of southern Africa, found something that surprised a lot of people. With the right tools and the right knowledge, foraging and hunting for food often took far less time than a modern workweek. The tools were not a desperate patch over a miserable life. They were efficient enough to buy something incredibly modern. Free time. That reframes the entire idea of primitive technology. These were not crude first drafts waiting for civilization to fix them. In many cases, they were finely tuned solutions, refined over hundreds of generations, that let people eat well, stay warm, and still have hours left in the day. And here's the part that should really stop you. Some of this ancient design logic never actually went away. The shape of a modern surgical scalpel echoes the same principle the Olduvai toolmakers discovered by accident. A thin, controlled fracture creates the sharpest possible edge. Some obsidian blades, made using Stone Age techniques, are sharper at the molecular level than surgical steel, sharp enough that a handful of modern surgeons genuinely use them in specific procedures today. The needle sitting in your sewing kit is, functionally, the same tool found in that Siberian cave. Same problem. Same solution. 50,000 years apart. So the next time you thread a needle, or pick up a kitchen knife, or zip up a coat against the cold, you are holding the descendant of a solution someone worked out by hand, by failure, by patience, with no instructions and no guarantee it would work. You pick up a rock. You hit it against another rock. Nothing happens. You try again, at a slightly different angle. That was never just the beginning of a tool. That was the beginning of you.